or examples or they want to share. And I am very happy to have Rushan Jilmamit here from the UN in Uzbekistan to help moderate, and she has a wonderful PowerPoint to help us be a bit interactive and get as much as we can out of this half an hour with you today. So I'll hand it over to her to start things off.
Yes, thank you very much, Juliet. Just want to make sure that everybody knows that there's an interpretation available. So please make sure that you tune into the right channel. If you prefer Russian, I think we have a Russian interpretation, and then keep it on this channel if English is your chosen language. So thank you very much and welcome everyone. It would be good to see most of you in camera, but if it's not possible, that's all right. Okay, so I know that we have limited time for this discussion. So without further ado, let's start it rolling. But I want to have first a sense of who are with us in this room today. So if I can just hear a shout out from one or two representatives from each country. Is there anyone from Armenia? Can we hear? Just say hello. Anyone from Armenia in this room right now? Okay. How about from Azerbaijan? Can we hear from our colleagues from Azerbaijan? Okay. Maybe they will join us later. How about from Georgia? Do we have anybody from Georgia?
Yes, I'm from Georgia.
Thank you very much and welcome. Welcome. We hope to hear from you later on. From Kazakhstan, I'm sure there are quite a number from Kazakhstan. Do we have anybody from Kazakhstan?
Yes, hello.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the representation from Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, from the Kyrgyz Republic. Anyone from Kyrgyzstan? Maybe they'll join us later. How about from Tajikistan? Just want to make sure so we know who are with us today. Tajikistan, anyone from Tajikistan? Is there one? Did I hear somebody say yes? Da? Okay. Turkmenistan, any colleagues from Turkmenistan, please?
It looks like this is only me. I mean, Rovshan speaking, the moderator of SDG 15. I mean, I am from Turkmenistan.
Okay. Well, welcome, Rovshan. Thank you for being a representative from Turkmenistan. Any colleagues from Uzbekistan? I hope there are some colleagues from Uzbekistan.
No, yeah, I'm from Uzbekistan, but representing Kara Institute, Regional Institute. But I'm sitting in Tashkent from Uzbekistan.
Okay, perfect. So we have quite a diversity of representation. As you all know, probably that Central Asia is sort of unique when we talk about life below water, basically, compared to other countries with more active oceans, coastlines, and coastal communities. As such, let's begin this discussion I want to have a sense of, tell us something about life underwater in your own countries for those with representations here. I heard that there's someone from Georgia earlier. So when we hear about life underwater, maybe tell me a thing or two. What comes to mind when it's life underwater, for example, in Georgia? I know we have, yes, please.
Black Sea or dolphins, fisheries. No, it's for Georgia, sorry, not Armenia.
Sorry, yes, sorry about that. Let me type it right here. Sorry, thank you very much. Yes, so I'm right here, I'm listening. So you think of Black Sea, dolphins, and fisheries?
Fisheries, yes.
Okay. How about from the other countries? For example, in Kazakhstan, I heard there's a representation from Kazakhstan earlier. what comes to mind when we talk about life below water or underwater? If not from Kazakhstan, go ahead, please. Can you please mention your name and where you're? Okay.
Бекмагомбетов Серик, представитель Республики Казахстан, бесполковник Международного фонда спасения Орала. Если жизнь под водой, сразу навскидку приходит Орал, Каспий, Каспийский тюлень, осетровые на севере Каспия, ну и реки, питающие эти моря, Волга, Урал, Амударья, Сырдарья. Да, и, кстати, богатые залежи углеводородов, нефти, газа. Все страны осуществляют их разведку и добычу, транспортировку. Спасибо.
Please pardon me with the spelling. We can correct that later. Okay, that's great. That's great. And it's good that there's some diversity of perspective in terms of like you think of water also not like just life underwater, but the utilization of that body of water for transport of, for example, of oil and gas and hydrocarbon. I know that we have representation also from Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, from other countries. If maybe somebody from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan joined us while we have started in this discussion. Any other perspective when you first hear of life below water in your country, what comes to mind? Then we will try to wrap up this one. Anything else from our colleagues from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, or Armenia?
We have one in the chat here from Kyrgyzstan.
Yes, please. Thank you for monitoring the chat. Hydroelectricity for Kyrgyzstan. Thank you. So that's good. That's what comes to mind. That's very important. Hydropower. Let's just put hydropower. There you go. Anything else? Anything else from our colleagues, maybe from Uzbekistan?
Again, from the chat, we have fish industry, industry and tourism.
Okay, tourism. And Ravshan is Turkmenistan, right? From Turkmenistan, is that correct? Fishery and tourism, very good. See, look at the diversity of how we think of life underwater, and not necessarily just underwater or below water, but basically our water resources. There's quite a diversity, but obviously there's something that's a common denominator is fishery, obviously. And I think what's also important in the region is hydropower. So that's a source of power for several countries in the region, and not just hydropower, but also in the production of oil and gas, which is, I think, in most countries here, it's very important. So thank you very much. I think we could take off from this. Now that we know how we look at life below water, think of it from the way that you have described it earlier. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, when it kicked off last March of 2020, how do you think these things that you have associated with life underwater were affected? How has fisheries been affected? How has the business in terms of hydrocarbon, oil and gas industry was affected? Or tourism, for example, I think that's a very, very good example of how it has been affected. So can we hear from our colleagues in terms of fisheries? Maybe another colleague from Georgia, or would you like to say something on how for example, COVID-19 has impacted fisheries, for example, or the activities within the Black Sea in Georgia?
Well, I don't know specific examples, but considering that for a long time everything was closed, the workers should have been quarantined, or they had the restrictions to access their workplace. They, as all businesses, of course, were had a huge impact. Maybe that's not as huge as in Georgia and hospitality, but the fishery should also be impacted, of course.
Okay, impact on hospitality industry along the Black Sea. Okay, how about in, I want to jump in first to Ravshan, I think from Turkmenistan. How has it affected? We know that Turkmenistan is probably not as open as other countries in terms of tourism, but how does COVID affected local tourism, for example, in Turkmenistan, coastal or water-based tourism?
Okay. First of all, of course, I mean, I should be speaking of international tourism. I mean, that's how the COVID, of course, made a major impact because of, the border closures and travel restrictions. Of course, the major impact has been made on international tourism. On the contrary, it boosted sort of the development of domestic tourism to a certain extent, especially we're talking about not only water-based tourism, but also like health tourism, medical type of tourism. Though, I mean, for the past, I don't know, of 2 years now, the pandemic has been rolling out. It looks like that the pandemic has started also to impact the domestic tourism as well. Like for instance, at least in Turkmenistan, I know that the government has imposed restrictions even on travel within the country. So that has also affected, let's say,
И это также повлияло на возможности
to access domestic tourism possibilities. And especially given that the Caspian Sea is the favorable, I would say, place for tourism for locals, not only for locals, I mean, because of of course, the seashores and, especially in the summertime. And in that sense, the government had to take undertake a special measure, to introduce a special measure for organizing massive, let's say, resting for nationals during this 3 summer months. Of course, including very severe, COVID, safety measures and other, let's say, restrictions, including, of course, only vaccinated people could get access to tourism areas. So there were, let's say, a number of additional, let's say, criteria and requirements that the people had to undergo in order, of course, to enjoy tourism opportunities. So that is very, in brief, let's say that this is how pandemic has affected and is still affecting the tourism industry, both international and local.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I'll be coming back to you also to our colleague from Georgia, because later I'd like to deep dive a little bit, literally deep dive on the water and see how it affected the life underwater, because I think that's mostly what we'd be interested in. However, as I've mentioned earlier, we recognize the uniqueness somehow of the coastal areas or the water areas within the region. So I would like to hear from our colleagues from either Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, because you've mentioned about hydropower or hydrocarbon. How has COVID somehow via your waterways has affected these sectors? Anyone from Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan? or from our other colleagues who probably joined us at a later time from Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan as well. Would be great to hear somehow from the ARLC and Uzbekistan as well. Go ahead, please identify yourself and let us know who you are and which organization
Я
you're
уже
from.
выступал. Исполнительный комитет Международного фонда спасения
yes,
Орала.
yes.
Я уже выступал.
IFAS.
Ну,
Yes.
Если, в частности, что касается нашей организации, допустим, наш исполком, он каждые 3 года, как меняется председательство, переезжает из страны в страну. Как бы мы до этого были в Ашхабаде 3 года, теперь вот мы переехали в Таджикистан. Из-за пандемии мы больше года не могли открыться, офис открыть. Ну, как бы все пути закрыты. Ну, жизнедеятельность во многом где-то приостановилась. Поэтому трехлетнего председательства год мы провели в таком заочном формате. Не работали в самом... Только сейчас начинаем эти встречи рабочих групп, реализация программ, то есть мы набираем обороты сейчас. Плюс, насколько я знаю, когда из-за пандемии очень много работников нефтегазовой сферы болели, предприятия закрывались на карантин, где-то снижалось производство. Может быть, это даже хорошо для экологии, но это факт, то, что такое происходило.
Okay, that's good to hear that that's the association that we put between COVID and basically the activities in the waterways. And I don't know whether Iskandar already spoke. I see that somebody raised their hand. Iskandar from Karak, would you like to speak or did you just speak? Sorry.
No, just maybe I may contribute a little bit. Not only about Uzbekistan, which, as I said, I'm sitting here. We have conducted last year, the end of the year, study on COVID-19's impact both on climate, environment, and also economy. And I join statements by colleagues that indeed economic activities have been reduced during the COVID-19, which maybe in short run is good for environment, unfortunately, it may be bad for people. But what we also find out that changes of climate change still continue, especially in Central Asia. Most of the countries, including Uzbekistan, have faced very serious drought, shortage of water in some parts of the year, and it will be repeat itself in 2021. So I think this is very serious threat to the environment. Of course, maybe humans' activities are reduced, but the environmental consequences of climate change are serious. It's impacting also life underwater. Second thing, which also we have to mention, that demand for water is increased. It's very, very surprising. Under the WASH project, which we have also conducted in CARI countries, including Uzbekistan and Central Asia, demand for clean water, access to clean water is increased. Unfortunately, access to it is limited in many countries of the region. So that's also becoming a serious issue. The other thing about post-COVID now recovery, unfortunately, prognosis is that we will have, at least in the beginning, not so much green recovery in Central Asia, or these indicators are showing. So I think we have to be very, very careful in planning of our post-COVID recovery, economic recovery, that consumption levels and also demand for water and water-related environment will be very huge, and pressure on this will increase. This is what we found out in our research related to climate change and economic recovery in CARI region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's those are actually very, very good points. And I think we see now that the executive secretary earlier mentioned, and also our regional DCO director mentioned, that we cannot look at things from silo perspective. And that's how this discussion is going, is that even though we want to look at only life underwater, there's interconnectedness also with other SDGs, such as in climate change, such as those SDG 6 on water and sanitation, for example. I would like to go back to the, because this is mainly about life underwater. And I know Georgia and Turkmenistan mentioned about fisheries earlier, and considering that there's a Caspian Sea and Black Sea, maybe more active fisheries present in your countries. How has it how has COVID affected the sector itself, the fisheries sector itself, or also the biodiversity? I'm just curious whether because of the closure, you also closed the fishery somehow, and maybe there was some sort of, did you notice any increase in terms of biodiversity, in the diversity of fish, in terms of population? I'm just wondering if this information are at all available at your disposal, or whether you've heard of anything. So please, let's share something.
Yeah. Thank you. For the state of populations, of course, it is quite difficult to assess, even in the normal times, not talking about the COVID era. But what we have heard from the projects who are working on poaching, combating of poaching in the Black Sea region, they feared that the COVID situation would increase the poaching cases, for instance, on sturgeons, but they were really happy to report that it didn't really. And as some other people also mentioned here, I think that for the life below water, the COVID restrictions had a positive impact, but that's of course my judgment, not the scientific assessment. But of course, it had an impact on people accessing their livelihoods, because there are, besides of the big fisheries, there are small fishing boats and who catch the fish and sell in the market. And for them, of course, that was a negative impact, because they could not access their livelihoods and get an income.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much. And we do understand that probably because, COVID just happened in the last year or so, there is this limited information and data. And obviously, because of accessibility, this information and data have not been collected to assess the pre-COVID, post-COVID sort of assessment in terms of population underwater. But what you have shared in terms of your observations, I think those are very valid as well. So thank you very much. I don't know whether there's any other representative from Turkmenistan, so I'll call on Ravshan and see if there's whether it's the same experience in the Caspian Sea in terms of fishery or other life underwater, for example. Have you heard of anything that's probably worth sharing to the group?
To be honest, I do not have, let's say, much information on the impact of on the work of the fisheries and fish, associated industries. But I do believe that, of course, that pandemic has impacted this industry, as well as, the other industries, including, of course, the small businesses and enterprises. Of course, I'm particularly talking about, businesses engaged in vending, and selling and exporting and production. So I believe that, but this is an assumption to a great extent, that the fish industry has been also affected by the pandemic restrictions as well.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we're seeing if we can cluster some of these responses that we've heard in terms of the impact. So I think it's good to somehow look at it, that because the impact of COVID-19 is not just on life underwater, but life above the water, and actually a little bit around the water area. And it's good to know that to highlight these points that probably there might be a necessity later as we move forward towards COVID-19 recovery to somehow get an assessment of these things that we do not have an answer yet at the moment. So I think these are good things to take forward. So thank you very much for sharing about how you think or how you perceive COVID-19 or the pandemic impacted life, not just underwater, but anything surrounding or around the water area, whether it's the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, or the Aral Sea within the region, or the rivers as well, the big rivers that we have in the region. So with that said, just taking off from the impacts, do you think there's anything that has been done either from the government side, from the private sector, to address somehow these impacts that you have mentioned earlier in terms of the impacts of COVID-19 on life underwater or the activities within the water areas? Any actions in terms of, yes, please go ahead. Sorry. Okay. Did I hear anything? Did I hear any intervention?
Yeah.
Just please say your name and the country where you're from and maybe the organization. If you want to make any intervention, please go ahead. Some of the measures that you've seen, you've observed from different sectors to address the impacts that we've just discussed in terms of life underwater or the activities around water areas. Any actions from, like, for example, we were talking about accessibility to fishing because of the closure, recorded increase in poaching cases. Were there any actions taken on this? And in terms of, for example, on tourism, how did coastal tourism, for example, how did the government try to address it or to somehow promote local tourism to make up for the losses in international tourism? And then in Uzbekistan, I know that it has been mentioned that the drought, obviously, it's affecting the remaining life underwater. So is there anything that has been done to address these issues or these impacts that we have just discussed? Or maybe I should phrase it differently. Maybe what we should do is, what do you think should be done to address these impacts? Maybe not what actions to take or what actions has been taken or what measures have been taken, but what do you think can be done to address these COVID impacts that we have discussed? I see Iskandar, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think one thing which already you mentioned yourself is maybe the stock taking exercise is good, that biodiversity, especially related to water, underwater, is important for the Karic region. We are not very rich on our biodiversity, unfortunately, the water biodiversity, because already my colleague Eric mentioned about RLC, and most of the water is used for different uses and purposes. So water-related life is very poor, so we have to try to protect them. And secondly, of course, social protection. I think we have to really be prepared in such long-term problems like COVID-19. It is not just 1 or 2 years, it will be long-term. And the recovery of economy and also recovery of consumption, again, will affect the environment. I think this must be a good one. And last one, I think we have to really also try to reassess our SDG achievements. I mean, we maybe this 1 year or 2 years, even 2 years, more than 2 years, we have been focusing only protecting of people. Now maybe a good time came to protecting of also the environment, especially life underwater. again, this policies, national policies are very important. On the regional level, already colleagues mentioned that there is a very good consolidated response, not only related to COVID-19, but overall to the environmental problems in the region. I think we have to really accelerate these processes and try to really also focus on how we can finance these initiatives. That's what I can tell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you tried to represent mostly what the group's probably thinking. In the interest of time, I think we just have a minute. So what I will do is, based on this discussions that we've had, I'll be summarizing it and present it back to the plenary. And if there is any message that you want to say, maybe in the last 30 seconds, I'm sorry, there was an interview. Sorry, I saw something. Patricia, reassess potential of aquaculture. Yes, that's correct. That's one thing that has not been mentioned, is on aquaculture. But I think when you started talking about impacts about life underwater, you may be thinking about the natural water pathways. But I think that's something that maybe we can elaborate on later on the aquaculture side, because some countries here are actually shifting towards that to actually respond to the demand for protein in terms of fish protein. So with that said, I would like to thank everyone for your active participation, as those who want to participate in SDG 15 would soon be joining this room. So thank you very much, and I wish you a good afternoon, and we'll see you at the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll hand this room now over to my colleague Vishwa from UNDP and Roshan. So please, now you're in room for SDG 15. There might be some others coming in from the other room. And if you want to be in SDG 5, you may also click the link my colleague shared. Over to you, Vishwa.
Thank you, Juliet. Hello, Robson.
Hi.
This is Vishwa Tiwari from UNDP. Sorry, we should have introduced earlier. Good to see that you are going to partly moderate the session together with me. I think, your help. So let me see how we go about. I think the SDG 14 was completely moderated by our host country moderator, but in this one, I don't know how we go about. Do we share, or you'll be moderating whole session? But anyway, let's start with your kickoff.
Okay, thank you, Vishwa, for this introduction and welcoming me. So we are here to discuss the SDG 15, life on land. Let me see if we have, I think people are coming over here.
Yeah.
Let me just before starting, let me just clarify which language I should be speaking in terms of the dominant audience, whether Russian or English. I can also switch to Russian if that is the preferred way. I mean, in terms of facilitating a more rigorous discussions and an exchange of views and opinions. But before. I can see a very broad audience. I'm not sure if I can do a quick introduction of those who have entered this chat room. What do you think, Bishwa?
Yeah, I think just if we start introducing, perhaps 5 minutes will be gone. I think it will be good, to find out which country are missing and whether we have participation from all countries or not. All 9 countries. No, I don't think so. We have just only 24.
Yes. In the interest of time, let me also keep that part of the introduction. Those who want to introduce themselves, are welcome to use the chat box.
Yeah.
And in terms of representing which country and what is your job titles and things like that. Yeah. So let us now switch immediately to discussions of SDG 15, which is life on land. I will be speaking English now, but if needed, I can switch to Russian in case that will be more helpful in terms of facilitating the discussion. So SDG 15, life on land. Let's say in short, this SDG captures such important matters as biological diversity, of course, flora and fauna, natural resources and landscapes, ecosystems. So what we will be talking about here is very much related to conservation of biological diversity and ecosystems. So let me immediately switch to the guiding questions that we're supposed to discuss today. And the first guiding question is asking whether the issues of, let's say, in this case on SDG 15 life on land have been mainstreamed into relevant policy measures, strategies in view of the COVID-19 impact, and whether recovery measures have been integrated into relevant political and strategic tools. So it is basically to understand how the COVID-19 has impacted the issues in relation to conservation of biological diversity, ecosystems, maybe more specifically the work of the protected areas, the protection of natural resources and things like that. So let me open the floor here for sharing your initial views in that sense, saying that if you have witnessed that your country or governments in your country have adopted, specific measures to ensure, to mitigate actually the impact of COVID-19 on the respective plans and strategies. For example, biodiversity conservation strategy and action plans, or maybe action plans to combat desertification, or maybe government plans and strategies in terms of, running the protected area systems and networks, things like that. So please, anybody wants to share the initial views? Please raise your hand, or maybe just unmute yourself so you can speak.
Colleagues, let me jump in here. So basically, Robson is asking two questions. The first one is how COVID-19 impacted land resources, forest resources, or other different species. Then second thing is that under the recovery measures of the government, whether the environmental, whether the biodiversity protection or protection of species or forest resources, they were taken into account or not. So what do you?
Maybe it's better that I repeat this question in Russian also.
Same, like I think as Ruslan asked, what was the impact on life on land, and then how it was addressed by the government. So as we heard up in our SDG 14 session, overall, I think in the beginning, the impact of COVID has also some positive impact on environment in terms of reduced air pollution because of lockdown measures and all that. There was a lack of human mobility. There was fewer vehicles flying on the road. So less pollution, less carbon dioxide emission. So in that sense, there was air pollution, I think less air pollution, but these benefits has been very temporary. And there are also many negative benefits on life on land. Based on my experience, or based on our last discussion in the Southeast Asia, we heard that there was, I think, some sort of relaxation by the government, because government attention was much more on immediate recovery from COVID. So more focus was given on health and education. More focus was given on how to restore the health of people. So in that sense, I think less attention was paid on the protection of the forest resources. So like in Philippines, we have heard of that. There was actually forest degradation even during the COVID time. So some of the, I think, similarly, I think many of the other events, ecotourism, I think earlier in the presentation we heard of that ecotourism was also impacted. And this ecotourism is generally, I think, poor people also work from the villages, from the rural areas. They have also been impacted. So some of these things I think we have heard of in the past. So let's start with the impact and whether there was any government policy measures that was taken into account to address those impacts. Colleagues, please. I think we have spoken a lot.
Так, коллеги, пожалуйста, если кто хочет высказаться относительно, значит, мер, значит, и действий, которые ваши страны, правительства ваших стран предприняли с точки зрения снижения негативного воздействия COVID-19 на вопросы сохранения биологического разнообразия, экосистем, борьбы с опустыниванием. Плюс, конечно, я бы хотел отметить еще один фактор, что, конечно, к дополнению, ну, как бы, к глобальной пандемии и его, говорится, последствиям, ну, в частности, я могу сказать по Центральноазиатский регион и Туркменистан в частности, да, последний год также он выдался очень засушливым, что, естественно, добавило, так скажем, своих минусов с точки зрения, так скажем, сохранения биологического разнообразия, как бы, значит, ухудшились вопросы с точки зрения опустынивания, значит, и так далее, и так далее.
Yeah.
Так, я смотрю, что здесь поднятая рука, пожалуйста.
Hand raised, yes.
Ассоциация практикующих экологов, пожалуйста. Ваш микрофон выключен. У вас отключен микрофон. У вас не включается микрофон?
No, please unmute. He or she can unmute. I think muted now, so we cannot hear.
It says that the settings do not allow unmuting. Who is in charge of the settings?
Who is Valentine?
We can hear you.
Yeah, they're saying that they cannot unmute themselves in order to speak because it's not allowed by the settings.
No, we allow
Can we
them.
address that?
We allow them.
Ah, okay.
Perhaps they can try again. They should be able to unmute.
Yes.
Пожалуйста, попробуйте еще раз. Ассоциация экологов, пожалуйста. No, they cannot. They're writing it in the chat. Maybe perhaps anybody else can, you know, take the floor while we are trying to address this technical issue.
Yeah, Roshan, may I? Hello.
Yes.
Yes. From Karag Institute. I already made the intervention in previous session, and I think the COVID-19 brought very interesting trends to the environmental protection and biodiversity protection in the region. First of all, of course, most of the efforts indeed have been directed to the medicine and also social protection, but at the same time, I think we understood that the COVID-19 brought also some issues which are related to environment. For example, air pollution. I think that became a #1 issue in many big cities like Tashkent, Bishkek, Almaty, and others, where people's health depends also quality of air. I think that was one thing. And second trend, which also I observed, at least in Central Asia, is trees. Cutting the trees while construction going on, I think it became a major issue. And many governments actually during this quarantine period have issued perhaps few decrees on protecting the trees and planting the trees. I think at least in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, we observed this trend. The other thing which also could be mentioned as a trend, the countries started to think about quality of life during this COVID-19. I think that includes not only medical services, again, it also includes quality of environment. The last thing, which also I agree with what Roshan said, is that water issues will will become a serious issue for Central Asia, which relates then also desertification, also deficit of water resources, access to water. I think this is becoming a unique issue for Central Asia, especially. The climate change will bring more and more surprises like droughts and maybe even floods in the winter. So I think these are the really changes which happens in spite of COVID-19. But I think due to deteriorated social protection, I think we have to be really prepared to protecting people from such disasters. About the government efforts, I think the government efforts are good, I think, but not enough. Because I think due to specific ignorance of environmental issues in this region for a long time, I think we have to really be careful, and especially also people, communities have to be engaged in this process. These are my observations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very useful. So frankly speaking, when I read literature, I'm not from that region. I see that there are some government efforts. Like Armenia adopted 22 actions to address the economic and social impact of COVID-19 pandemic. For example, in order to generate employment through afforestation program. So that's something very important because it helps promote forest biodiversity, as well as also generate employment. Similarly, in Kazakhstan, also implemented a policy. Kyrgyzstan developed its third economic recovery package, which includes several instruments to promote the production of ecologically friendly products. Similarly, in Uzbekistan identified 8 key areas of economic recovery from COVID-19 crisis, including the president of Uzbekistan has also instructed development of a strategy of industrial policy that includes the energy efficiency, which is very much necessary for climate change, actually, because climate change has also serious impact on biodiversity. So there are some efforts in the literature done by the government of Central Asia. It will be good to hear from the colleagues.
Let me also add that in Turkmenistan, despite, of course, the ongoing pandemic, the government of Turkmenistan has not stopped the practice of the nationwide tree planting campaigns. So every year, the government of Turkmenistan promotes this initiative of planting several million trees across the country, which I think is also a very good sign, and the tool of the government basically to try to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 on the issues of biodiversity conservation and ecosystem management. Anybody else who wants to speak? I think we have not yet resolved the issue of unmuting. It says that they cannot unmute themselves because of the status. That's how I understand. That only hosts can speak, which
we made them co-hosts so they can speak. Probably it's microphone is muted from their side because we opened it.
Ассоциация экологов, вы здесь, вы сможете говорить, вас перевели в статус организаторов, если вы можете попробовать включить свой микрофон и высказаться.
I think
I don't see them, they disappeared. I think maybe they have a technical issue with their device, I don't know. They're reconnecting, okay. Anybody else wants to speak in terms of measures, or maybe we can switch to the second question. So the second question, and maybe it's about whether you see emerging possibilities, initiatives, and priorities in order that your country should be investing in order to promote a more sustainable recovery. Now, in our case, within the SDG15 on life on land issue, and what would be your key policy recommendations to drive recovery from COVID-19 in an inclusive manner? And also, maybe you can come up with examples of good practices that you think can be replicated, or in your country, or maybe in the context of the region. So please, if you have any specific recommendations and pieces of advice that you can share, what tools and measures should be promoted in order to mitigate the COVID-19 impact and facilitate the recovery. I can see that Association of Ecologists are back. Да, пожалуйста, вы вернулись, вам слово.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники. Я извиняюсь, я не могу включить видео. Меня слышно, да?
Да, я вас слышу хорошо, спасибо.
Отлично. Спасибо организаторам за приглашение. So good day, dear participants. I represent Association of Practicing Ecologists. We are based in Kazakhstan. This is a union of professional ecologists. So we joined this session because we are currently facing a problem in the capital of Kazakhstan. Maybe you've heard about it. So during the pandemic, we faced the problem that these construction companies, they got very active. So almost all activities were forbidden except this industrial enterprises and construction. And during the pandemic, there was a problem with tree cutting, illegal tree cutting, and also construction. Especially in the capital of Kazakhstan, they started draining the lake. It is a lake that was given in the map, on the map from 1913. So it is a natural lake, and in order to buy this land for free, let's say not for free, but for cheaper price, these construction companies started draining the lake. And pandemic actually, activated this kind of illegal and issues that are activities that are against the nature. So we are still trying to solve this problem. We already sent a letter to the president of Kazakhstan, and it is it is related to this SDG 15 and to the SDG related to water life. So we ask everyone who is participating in this session to pay attention to this issue in Kazakhstan. We created a page called Sos Taldekol. The name of the lake is Taldekol, so it is a natural lake. So maybe in Instagram you can see the page and you can see all the videos and pictures, what is being done there. It is against SDG 15, it is against our international agreements. So we ask everyone who is participating here to take part in this. So considering this issue, we are now trying to integrate SDG into governmental planning. For example, in construction area, we found out that our government makes assessment of the work of mayors based on just constructed square meters of houses, without taking into account where it was constructed, how it was constructed. So it is a problem at governmental level. So here, regarding the recommendations, we would recommend to other countries, to other Central Asian countries, also review their KPIs at governmental level for mayors, and to include in this construction area SDGs, all SDGs, like SDG, especially environmental SDGs. So now we are a small group of professionals, of citizens of Kazakhstan trying to save this lake. But despite of that, unfortunately, we are still seeing some works going on there. So using this platform, we want to ask you for help and to contribute to saving this lake in the capital of Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. It is well noted. So please, anybody else wants to share their, recommendations on how to strengthen, the in-country work on biodiversity management, ecosystem protection, including, of course, climate change issues, air pollution, and so on. Please. And I can see that Association of Ecologists, they have shared the link to the Instagram account on the subject that they have just spoken about.
Yes.
So we have we have 5 minutes left.
Colleagues, please come. Any recommendation to protect the forest?
You can also use
protect the land.
For in case you experience technical, glitches with your microphones, you can use the chat box for sharing your views. Any good examples from your countries? I mean, we have 9 countries, I think, present here that you can share in terms of mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on ecosystems, on life on land, on issues in relation to combating desertification, biodiversity, things like that. Maybe you can come up with examples that they have the country, I mean, while endorsing, the recovery plans, they have also included, integrated, specific sections on environmental protection. Or maybe they have revised biodiversity strategy and action plans.
We can give an example if you don't mind.
Yes,
This
please.
is again from the station. Yes. So it is not really related to the pandemic, but it is in general a good practice. So if you maybe, if you are aware, in 2015, we have a mass killing of saiga in Kazakhstan. That was a catastrophic situation, actually. And after that, our government, with the help of the Association of Biodiversity Conservation of Kazakhstan, they implemented, they have forbidden to the hunters to hunt on the animals, on the birds during spring. So also they have forbidden hunting to saiga. Like implementing these measures, we found out that this year the population of saiga have been it is at the same amount as it was in 2015, and this year it is more than it was in 2015. So this kind of measures from the government side, it gives a positive impact. So it is in general, not really related to the pandemic, but it is in general. So here we want to point out that the regulator, governmental organization responsible for biodiversity conservation plays a great role, actually. So it is very important for the governmental organization to work closely with the associations and to take into account the recommendation given by the expert.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Lyudmila Kiktenko. Please unmute yourself.
Да, добрый день еще раз. Если позволите, я с точки зрения возможности выполнения любых экологических программ, стратегий, приведу пример Латинской Америки, где 14 стран, они смогли совместно написать проект в Зеленый климатический фонд, называется Regional Readiness. И этот проект позволил странам привлечь 3 миллиона на трансфер технологий и начать прорабатывать такую совместную систему по электрическому транспорту во всем регионе, то есть, естественно, с зарядками, с пересечением границ, с общими какими-то правилами и т.д. и т.п. И, естественно, вся эта система, она абсолютно четко учитывает, изучает environmental, social safeguards и, конечно же, вопрос гендера. Вот, я считаю, что для нашего региона тоже, что очень важно было бы все-таки сесть и не просто разговаривать, обмениваться информацией, опытом, знаниями. Это очень важно, но тем не менее мы должны уже начать практиковать написание вот таких инвестиционных заявок совместных, по которым договариваются страны. Сейчас пока еще таких примеров не знаем, особенно вокруг вопросов, которые способствуют предпринятию каких-то экологических мер, не знаю, там та же высадка лесов, выращивание совместное. И такие объединенные проекты, они, кстати, по private-public partnership могут быть абсолютно привлекательны. Вот хотела этот пример привести и сказать о необходимости таких усилий. Все, спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Людмила. Вот, кстати, вот пример по САГе мне, в принципе, вот мне такую мне идею подал, что, в принципе, очень важно, наверное, обратить внимание на работу природоохранных территорий, то есть усилить именно их работу с точки зрения сохранения биологического разнообразия, флоры и фауны, именно в контексте, так скажем, тех дополнительных ограничений, которые создались вследствие, так скажем, вот этой глобальной пандемии. И у меня такое ощущение, что, наверное, не так много стран, которые, так скажем, приняли соответствующие поправки в своей национальной стратегии, планы действий по работе природоохранных территорий именно с этим, говорится, с учетом. Людмила, у вас рука поднята, это старая рука или вы еще раз хотите сказать? Ага, все, это старая рука. So we have, I think, 1 minute left before we complete our breakout session. So I would like to thank everyone for their inputs and sharing their views. We will be reporting back in the plenary on the outcomes that we have discussed, as you know, on the issue of COVID-19 impact on life and land issues and what recommendations we are suggesting across the countries in terms of, you know, intensifying and strengthening and improving, you know, the in-countries and the regional work in protecting the environment and protecting the biological diversity. Bishwa, do you want to add anything else before we wrap up here?
Yeah, thank you, Robson. Thank you very much for facilitating, moderating this session. And many of the colleagues, they did not speak, but it will be good. I mean, if you have any suggestion, you can further write back to us, to ESCAP. But we'd like to hear much more about if you have some country examples, some good practices that you'd like to contribute to our report, that will be great. I heard, I think, a couple of times from CAREC as well as from Ecological Society. So if you have some good work, or if you suggest that or this sort of a work in this Central Asia is good, and that can be replicated to other countries, it will be good to share with us so that we can incorporate in our report. So thank you, Robson. Thank you, colleagues, for your all the input. Much appreciated. Over to you, Robson.
Thank you. Now, yeah, with this, I thank you all and request all of us, I mean, to go back to the initial room, to the main room.
Can we ask a question before we leave?
Okay.
Where we can send our letter and our recommendations, like to which email or contacts?
You can send me, I think, as well, or perhaps you send it to Natalie at the UNDP country office, our regional office of ESCAP there.
Okay, so the contacts can be found at the website, or?
Yeah, otherwise you can share me, bishwatiwari@undp.org. I just bishwatiwari@undp.org. Let me everyone. Okay.
Okay, thank you, and let's go back to the main room. The link is in the chat box.
Yeah, the link is in the chat box now. Thank you, Robson. Good to see you. Wish I would
Thank
have
you, you too.
communicated with you earlier.